Welcome. Welcome to my live stream. My name is Doug Fink, and today I'll be your host and presenter. I'll be talking about VS Code and AI, smarter coding. That's what we're going to talk about today. We'll see if we can get all to all these topics. Talk about MCPs, model context protocol, a wider, hopefully wider hot item right now. We'll talk about agents. We're going to talk about VS Code. We're going to talk about prompting, a whole bunch of stuff. Good times. If you have questions at any time, drop them in the comment section, and I will be happy to. I will keep an eye on it and happy to answer questions. So just to let you know, in May, so in a few weeks, Michael Bender will be on, and we're going to do I do a 2.5 Geeks theme, and Michael Bender's from Microsoft. He trains and he teaches and he does a lot of the content on about Azure on the Microsoft site. And he's just, he's really he's really into the AI stuff. So it's going to be a really good conversation. He's a practitioner and, he's just really has great information and we have good chemistry. So I think it should be a good, fun time. Another thing, if there are folks in New York, Microsoft Build is coming up on May 19th. We're going to do if you're in New York, here's an opportunity to come down. We're gonna have a bunch of MVPs myself. I'm going to work at being there this time, and I should be able to make it. So head back over to the RSC where you RSVP'd for this session, and you can see both. You can sign up for the chat with Mike Bender, and you can sign up for the build. And like I said, we're gonna have a bunch of MVPs there. We're gonna do a watch party of the Microsoft Build keynote, and then we'll have some great discussions. Anyone using Roo in VS? Great question, Patrick. I'm not yet, but that's definitely a big time. Roo and Spark are really another really bunch of cool stuff, but I can't speak to either one of those at this point. But if there are people here that are doing it, yeah, chime in. I see a lot of good stuff about it, and it's AI based, so and it's agents and whatnot, so it's got to be top notch nonetheless. So this is my YouTube channel. I'll drop it in the chat. If you want, head on over, subscribe, hit the notification. You'll know when this gets published. So and you'll know when I publish other material. So let's just get going because we're already at 15 minutes in. So my name's Doug Fink. I'm a 16-time Microsoft MVP, and I wrote a book called PowerShell for Developers. I organize this meetup. It started a bunch of years ago where I did it in person at Microsoft, and then I pivoted to online. You can see my connection information. I'm on X, YouTube. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on LinkedIn. You can check out my GitHub repos. Pretty much all the code that you'll see that I do, if I do any, I'll do a little bit, are up there or on the Microsoft PowerShell gallery. And so I just want to really quickly, I know I've gone over this a few times with some people on here, but I just want to cover some things. So like somebody here mentioned Roo, and I mentioned Spark. There's a bunch of IDEs out there. There's Cursor, there's Continue, there's Windsurf stuff. There's all kinds of different models. There's different kinds of developer experiences and user experiences around large language models. And it's boiling down to three things, three principles: context, model, and prompt, which we should see a bunch of that today. How much context do you give? If you give it too much, even though the models are getting better, OpenAI just dropped their 4.1 and their O4 models with 1 million token context. And they also are the boasting rights that they can actually send up, I think, 1 million tokens and they can find a needle in a haystack. They can put things in the middle of the documents, the 1 million tokens at the end or at the beginning, and you can ask it specific questions and their models can find these things. Still, understanding how to get the context right, how to apply it is important. And it doesn't matter which environment that you use. The better you do with the context, the better you get answers. Depends on the models. Certain models are tuned and trained to handle different things, whether it's writing, code generation, etc. So knowing which models you're going to use, or seeing if you're not getting the results with one model, switching to another model makes a difference. Prompting is fundamental. That's how you elicit good answers from the model. You could be very simple. You're going to see I'm going to do minimal prompting and get some interesting results. And if things are not going right, if you can triangulate on these three things, give it more context, give it less context, change up the model, improve your prompt, triangulate on this stuff, you'll hit the bullseye. We're going to see some things about agents. Just really quick, what's an agent? Basically, an agent is an object that has access to an LLM. What's an autonomous agent? If you put a loop around this, that becomes an autonomous agent. That's a basic definition, but that really kind of captures all this stuff. We're going to talk about MCP servers. This is kind of what it looks like. We'll see a few in play. So basically, if you have something like a local data source, right? Let's say you need access to some file types, or you need access to a database, and that could even be a database that you have sitting in the cloud. You can create or use an MCP server that connects to that. And if you use a host like Claude or other IDEs like VS Code and whatnot, they're all beginning to support MCPs. You can write these just little snippets of code, wrap it into what they call an MCP definition, which is not hard. And then you have access to all kinds of different things. You should definitely check out on the internet, type in things like awesome MCP servers. You'll find tons of lists on GitHub and elsewhere. Start looking around. Be very wary. You never know what you're going to get. So, put it in the sandbox as best you can, or read up on it and figure out what it does. Microsoft has delivered a whole bunch of them. They even have a GitHub MCP service, so you can drop that into Visual Studio Code, ask questions about repos. It can even do things like create a repo, create a PR, check out this PR, do some things, create an issue, and you don't actually have to interact with GitHub directly to make that happen. You can let the agent do this kind of, like, look at this code. If you see a problem, kick off a PR or kick off an issue to the repo. Things like that. They also just dropped one, I think, on SQL, where it actually, the SQL piece, you give it access to your databases if you're comfortable with that, and then it will read the schemas, and you can then ask questions like, hey, how many tracks did we sell on those albums last year? Albums on Spotify last year, and how much did they cost, and what was the maximum amount of time that each one of those were? You don't have to write the actual SQL. It will determine that from the actual schema itself. So MCPs are not only hot because they're cool, but they're really opening up the doors for lots of different things. It's really one of the really interesting additions to what we're doing. And I like to always end up with this as a note. Lots of hype in the space. It's going to take our jobs. It's going to be the end of the world, or the panacea is here. We'll never have to do anything again, and life will be good. But AI will not replace you. A person using AI will. You learn how to use these tools. Contrary to, I think it's my opinion, contrary to popular belief, it doesn't make you atrophy. It makes you smarter. And I think it becomes more fun what you can get done. All right, let's take a look at a bunch of things. So before we get into the IDEs and whatnot, I just want to take a moment. Okay, you can gonna show one. Let's try. I want to show you a couple of tools that I think. Let's try and get this. What are we doing here? Control. There we go. See, I can't get my keys going today. I'm looking for install. All right. If you do an install, I have a module in PowerShell. If you're interested in doing PowerShell, called PSAI. And it comes with a whole bunch of stuff. It's a port of the Python OpenAI SDK that sits inside of PowerShell. Basically, OpenAI democratized everything with REST calls, and everything runs on their servers. So you can do things like, what is the capital of France? Okay. And what Q does, it wraps up, it's actually, I'm creating because I'm doing function calling inside of uh, enable that as well. This is basically agent capabilities. I'm not going to show you the full agent capability, but Q wraps up a bunch of calls into the SDK that make this happen. And what's happening here is when you do a prompt, it comes back with the agent response. And then you can do things like you can follow up and you can say Spain, right? Now, notice it gets the capital Spain correct because it has track of the conversation. I've created it so it can have memory. That's a feature of the PSAI module. And then I can even ask it Italy, and then we can do a nice little prompting trick or this is one you want to keep in the back pocket. You can say in a table. So as you go along, you can actually ask it a bunch of questions, get a bunch of details, and then at the end you can say, well, put that in a table, and it creates a markdown table for you. Cool. So, and then here, if I wanted to, I can then hit enter, and it copies it to the clipboard, and then I can paste it. And then I have something called Glow on my machine, and I can render that in a markdown table. Now, I just showed you how to interact with it manually. You can do this and enable it so you can run without your interaction. And then you can wrap this inside of scripts, inside of GitHub Actions, and so on to do all kinds of cool stuff. You can change whatever model OpenAI supports. That's what this does. It only supports the OpenAI, this particular tool. I do entire demos on this. So, and I think I have a whole bunch of videos that really walk through it nicely. So there's another one I have called you can install PSAI suite, PSAI. And what that does is you can actually now have access to things like Ollama, and I support about 12 or 13. I have all these providers that are supported, and the way that works is, so you can see it supports Anthropic, Azure AI Foundry, it supports GitHub. So if you have access to these and all you have to do is set your key, go to any one of these or all of them. I have keys for all of these. Some you pay, some are free. And then you can do things like, let's see if I can. And then you have access to a thing called invoke chat completion, capital of France's typical prompt. And now I'm saying go after Grok and use the latest Maverick model from Llama, right? And I can then change this up. Let me get back here. And let's say I want to go after, I can go after their new other model, Llama Scout, but now instead of using it from Grok, I'm going to go after it on Open Router. Okay, so let's check that out. And we can do things like, see if we can have some fun with this. I'm going to make an array of providers and models. And the provider model looks like the name of the provider, colon, and then the name of the model that you use that provider supports. So there I set up an array of models, right? And what I want to do is, see if we can do this correctly. And now it's running. So I'm now just looping through with a for each object. I'm doing it in parallel using it. That's a feature of PowerShell. And I just called 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 models, actually 6. And you can see I just pulled out, I ran the invoke completion, and I just pulled out the elapsed time. How long did it take to execute? What was the model? And then I can actually see this response, which gets truncated at this point, but I can spell that out if I wanted to. And you can see that Grok DeepSeek took 3 seconds to answer that prompt. And Grok Gemma took 0.2 seconds. And again, 13 plus providers, access to all the models that those providers have. I find this really useful because when the new models come out, all you have to do is specify the model at the end and you're good to go. So when OpenAI dropped the O4 mini and they dropped 4.1, there's no changes to the suite. You just have to type in the new name and you're off to the races. This is great for starting to do evals, all that kind of good stuff. Question, what's my preferred LLM? Great question. I have no preferred LLM. That's one of the reasons I wrote this thing, right? So if I sit down, I have a bunch of different prompts that I have and I keep those prompts around that are like they're my litmus tests, so to speak. Some new models come out. I start using this kind of stuff just to see the kind of responses. And then I go, oh, okay, you know what? The new Meta Llama 4 is not that good. It doesn't really hit this piece. Or the new Anthropic 3.7. Wow, look at the way it does the writing. I like that. So, we saw this week, in the last 2 weeks, we saw Gemini 2.5. They just dropped Flash. That's a second model from Google. And OpenAI dropped 3 or 4 models this week. The new reasoning models, the O3 model, so on and so forth. I don't have a favorite. It changes every week. But that's why I build these kinds of tools and use these kind of tools so that I can make better decisions about what I like. All right. Good question, though. Ron asks, is this model running locally on your desktop GPU? None of those do that, but that's a great question. You can see in here, there's Ollama support. So if you have Ollama running, which I took off my machine the other day, because I want to do a couple of other things. If you tie into the Ollama, that would be all running on your local machine, and you can then it'll access your GPU, and the Ollama provider works just fine. So I hope that answers the question. But none of the ones I just showed, those are all on different providers that use their inference infrastructure to do what I just did. Question, what is a good small model to run on your home lab for coding? You're gonna have to figure that out. Depends on what you're coding, how you're coding, the complexity of your code. But you can use things like 5.4 from Microsoft. That's one of their latest ones, and I had some really good results with that. And those like the 5.4, for example, you can get that in Azure AI, in the AI Foundry, and I believe in the GitHub. So if you go check out GitHub, they support all those models from Microsoft as well as other, they support OpenAI, they support DeepSeek, so on and so on. So yeah, how to integrate self-hosting Ollama 5.3 with PSAI suite? Well, all you got to do is let's see if we can do a chat. I'm not going to be able to run it. Here we go. So you would change that to Ollama here. That's your provider, colon 5.4, right? Or 5.3, whichever you want. And that would then hook you up locally and you're good. And if you mean by self-hosted, yeah, that would be running Ollama I'd be running Ollama locally on my machine. And when I ran this, it would actually use that and use my GPU. Does that make sense? So which LLM was using Q? Great question. So all the stuff that's in PSAI, not PSAI Suite. PSAI is broader, all for the OpenAI stuff, which is the port of the SDK from OpenAI. That was the default out of that is O4 Mini. But you can change that. So for example, let me see if I can get this right. Nothing like live demos that I'm not prepared for. LLM. Oops, let's do new agent. Do LLM, and then I have something called new OpenAI chat. And then if I hit control space, those are all the models I support for OpenAI. Okay, so you can do even back to GPT-3.5 Turbo. And as you can see, I even have O3 Mini. And even though if you don't see it in the list, right, like you don't see the GPT-4.1, you can just type in GPT-4.1 here. And it should work, which I'm not going to prove if it is or not. Oops. Spelling does count, right? So this is how you would use it and inside of Q or inside the new agent stuff. I'm not going to go through the new agent pieces. I do that in other videos, but I will be doing another live stream like this, specifically focused on what this kind of stuff does, and go deeper on like new agents, function calling, and what MCPs do. Cool. Great questions. Any other questions at the moment? We can bounce into the next pieces. We're all good? Awesome. Um, and if what I said, if it doesn't make sense, keep asking. Definitely, I could have misinterpreted your question or just plain got it wrong. All right. So we're here to talk about some Visual Studio Code. Let's see how we can do this. Yeah, let's do it this way. And the first up, I'm going to talk about, let's talk about, now I'm going to do all these demos. I'm going to do these demos using PowerShell just because I like, it's easier to demo and for me. And, but I've done all this kind of stuff. I've done Python, I've done TypeScript, I've done C#. It's an LLM, so it knows pretty much everything. Have you tried the latest Azure MCP? Absolutely. And I just uninstalled that this morning because I wanted to have a cleaner left-hand side. Yes, the Azure MCP stuff is great. So here's the MCP list, which we'll get to in a minute, but this is everything that now ships with GitHub Copilot. You can download, if there's a search for how to install GitHub Copilot, and you get on the free plan, which means you get, I don't know what the X number of queries you get a month or a week or how that works. I have a complete subscription, but you can get the free version. It's easy to install, and that comes with all the new pieces, the MCP, the agent mode, all that kind of stuff. And the amount of MCPs out there are absolutely mind-boggling. And MCPs have been around since November. I dismissed them in November because I was more attuned to OpenAI's. I was used to doing things like custom GPTs, and MCPs are completely different. And between November and February, March of this year, so like in less than 6 months, pretty much every company has said, okay, we're just going to wire up MCP hosts in everything that we have. And then they just keep, Microsoft's putting out tons of MCPs, other companies, OpenAI, Anthropic. So and Google's on board. It's absolutely fascinating. And if we thought we were underwater with all this information a couple of months ago, we are underwater again. How do you build these? How do you use them? How can you tell? There's a lot of things to question about how, what, where, and why. So we're going into the MCP talk. Let's take a couple of more of those, and then we'll do this. Is MCP works with like REST for AI applications? We'll see how some of the pieces. There's a bunch of different modes. Let me see. I didn't want to do this yet. Yeah, let me show you that. So let's come back to that question, Pavan. That's a great question. It's a little more than MCPs, but REST APIs, but it's along those. That's the mindset that you want to get into. What are the feature differences between Code and Code Insiders? Can we uninstall the Insider now? The differences between that, so I'm in the Insider version here, and then there's the stable version. The stable version is great if you want to do that, like if you're doing production work every day for clients or at work. That's definitely recommended. The Insiders get a new build every night. I like staying on the Insiders because I can see what they start putting out when they don't tell you. So if that's something that you'd like to do, I like being an early adopter. I saw agent mode before they started talking about it. So that's up to you. But if you're in agent mode, like when I come down in here to the terminal, there's lots of wacky little things that happen, and they're constantly updating how the terminal works. Things are a little bit slower. I can tell there's debug stuff going on in the background. So, but I like jumping on this stuff. Dale says, I started looking at N8N, interesting product to create an AI agent. N8N is great. Take a look at that. I'm not a fan of no code, low code, but N8N does some really cool stuff. I look at that kind of tool and its competitors because I get ideas about it. I go, oh, how do they implement that? Oh, I can do that. So, but yeah, look at N8N. It could fit your needs out of the box, and then that's all that counts. Use what works for you, right? I'm not here to tell you what to use. I'm not here to tell you what to adopt AI or not. I'm just going to share the information that I find because I work with this stuff every day, including weekends. And I don't do it because I have to. I do it because I enjoy it. So, and then I try to share my information. Yeah, lots of really amazing. There's tons of products out there that are coming online and been online that are worth checking out. It's a lot of work, very low code. I like to look at different products. Absolutely, you gotta. If you're looking at different products, you're staying. That's really a good way to stay. You go, oh, what they can push the boundaries that way. Is it really good? Oh, who else is doing stuff like that? It's a great way to get to know the players and who's doing what and why. And then it's even good to say, oh, N8N did X, Y, Z, and then they dropped it. Wonder why. How much time do you spend? I was just going to say that. How much time do you and I don't, I try to say your name, but I apologize, Surendu. How much time do you spend in staying up to date in Gen AI? It is an ever-growing difficult, absolutely, totally difficult. But you know what? You got to be in it to win it. That's my mindset. What do I mean? And what's the deal with that? Somebody actually asked this the other day. They said, how much time do you spend? Do you have to spend at least an hour a day? There you go, hours. But somebody said you get to spend at least an hour a day to stay on, to stay relevant or to stay on top of this stuff. And I responded on LinkedIn and I was like, well, it depends what you mean by stay relevant. An hour a day, in my opinion, so that's 7 hours a week, multiply it out, right? 30 hours a month. That can get you past the buzzwords. It can get you to knowing some of the players. But if you're not, I cannot see, MCPs came out where they started hitting really, really importantly. And it took me quite a while to figure it out. I didn't sit down 8 hours a day to do it, but I know I came back to it multiple hours every day for a period of time, and I'm still not where I want to be. I'm still not at the understanding that I want to have. Um, so, yeah, you got to spend, it's a second job. I put it that way. Let's see. Can we use MCP in Salesforce? I have no idea. Never used Salesforce. Run it on Hugging Chat. I don't know if does it work on that. Oh, Ron asked, "What's your thought on DeepSeek?" I mean, again, which having an opinion about an LLM, I don't care personally. Why? Because it's going to change in a week. We are at like multiple models being announced by multiple providers in a month. It's almost like every week, every other week that this is happening, it's going to go to every day. So I'm not, LLMs to me are a commodity. Yeah, they're important, but it's really the developer experience and the user experience around it that really is a compelling aspect. Dale says, all day, 8 hours, read about it, 1 to 2, and play hours a week. There you go. 9 to 5, pay the bills, 5 to 10, advances your career. I'm in. Absolutely. I mean, and this has been true forever, right? As technology, I've been around for 100 years. And, back in the day, it was like, oh, okay, what's Borland doing? What's Microsoft doing? Oh, I got to install Delphi and C++ and all this stuff. And I have to check out the new compilers. If you want to be in this business, you got to be willing to go, okay, I'm going to spend some time. The other thing that's interesting is if this is really moving too fast and it's not your taste, somebody once said, maybe you should go into lumber. They don't introduce new trees that often. Okay, so I don't want to get into like all the, I'm not gonna be able to answer all these questions, but yeah, Notebook LM's great. Yeah, every company's putting out really cool stuff. Some things hit, some things don't. Do you use it? Yeah, I actually did a demo a few months ago with Notebook LM. I was actually amazed at what it could do. I think I think I gave it a transcript of something I did on YouTube, and then it spent 3 minutes, and then there were two people discussing what I had discussed, and they gave nuances and they talked about it in a way I would never have done, and I just was like, it's just amazing. So I'm completely stunned by AI, what it can do and what it offers. All right, so let's do some demos. So I'm inside of Insiders. Visual Studio Code Insiders. And what I want to show first is, let's see. So one of the things, this is like the original stuff that it used to do. If I type in the word function, notice I get and if you're familiar with this, great. If not, this will be a repeat for you. If not, we're going to move on to more the newer, other cooler stuff as well. So I just typed in function. The grayed out, the ghost text that you see is the standard GitHub in the editor saying, hey, I'm just going to suggest this kind of stuff. Yes, next line edit. Yep, we're gonna talk about NES as well in a minute, which is next edit suggestions. Oops. So I'm going to, so I can get that. Now, if I type something like get FIB, right? Let's see if it, so there you can see next edit suggestions, right? I don't know what it's going to do yet. We'll get back to that. So this is one of the ways that when you start typing, um, you can start getting these edit suggestions. This works in every language, right? It knows from the context, it knows the type of file you have open. The more files you have open, the more it can do things because it gleans context, right? Remember, context model prompt. So it gleans the context of what what you want to do. Like, oh, you've got 3 C# files open and you're typing in, a method. Oh, let me check out a bunch of different pieces. So that's cool. But now there's also, now you can do inline Copilot. So I hit Control I. I'm on a Windows machine. So I hit Control I. I'm not sure what it is on Mac. You'll figure that out. And I think you can come up here and say, yeah. So this little guy up on the top right, this is your Copilot. And if I click on it, I can do editor inline, do a bunch of different things, and we're good. So can you talk about orchestration of AI in business workflow? Let's take an example. I'm not going to talk about that today. That's a much deeper topic, but that's a great question. That's a topic for another live stream. Yep. Can you use local LLM in VS Code? Great question. So let's do this again. And actually, where is that? I always get that mixed up. Yeah. So if you see, so the question is, can you use a local LLM in VS Code? All right, we're going to jump to that real quick. So if I come over here and click on the icon, I'm going to toggle the chat, right? This is called bring your own key. Down here on the bottom right, you can see I don't know if you can see it. I have GPT. Let me just do that. So down here on the bottom right, you can see I have GPT preview selected, right, as my model. I'm in agent mode, but I can drop down that box and I can say manage models. So when I come into manage models, this is where you can pick. These are the ones that they support as different providers. And I think they have Ollama as well. So they have OpenRouter, Ollama, OpenAI. And when you choose one of them, let's say I'm going to pick OpenRouter. This is where you put your API key, right? And if you put your API key in here and you set it up in your profile, you can use PSAI Suite or you can use it here. So if I change this, then I can start using different providers and models. And I think it comes up with a list after this of what models you can choose of that provider once you give it a key. And then that sets up your environment and you're ready to go. Also, this is not this is not limited to Microsoft, right? Every one of these companies, Cursor, Windsurf, this, Continue, they're all watching each other. And when a great idea comes up, the other one takes it and they make it part of their product and vice versa, so on and so forth. So we're in an amazing time as consumers for this stuff. Bring your own key, choose your own models. And you just have to be, aware that when you do use let's say, an OpenRouter, that's going to come out of your kitty. It's going to cost you different. So when I do drop down, right? So here's my context model and providers. So the context is what file do I have open? What other files do I have open? And the Visual Studio Code environment figures out, oh, okay, that's your context. And then I can drop this down and I can pick the model that I want. So if I want to use, O4 Mini, the latest preview from OpenAI this week, I can use that. I'm going to stick with Claude Sonnet, no particular reason. And then I'm going to say something like need a fib function. Press enter, and then it'll take that and it's now figuring out, okay, let's figure out what you want. And it figured out from that minimal prompt that I want a Fibonacci, right? And it spells it out, gives me all the goodies, and I can click accept or I can hit close, right? Just show, and if I actually, so let's do that. Now notice here, right, I have, it's using recursion. Now let's say I didn't want to use recursion, right? So I can select this again and I can say, don't use recursion. And the cool part is if I misspell any of these things, it'll take care of it because it's a next token predictor. So don't use recursion, press enter, and it goes off, starts figuring things out, takes the model, takes the context using the model. And what's really neat is notice it just gives me the selection that it's going to change. And I can say close, don't use it. I can rerun it and say I can follow up with it, just like in my queue function. You can do a follow up and say, hey, that's almost right. I want you to do ABC. In this case, I'm just going to accept it and we're good to go. So I'm just going to do a bunch of different things, just kind of planting seeds for everybody. Okay. And then just to kind of go, oh, drive the imagination. Does it need to be in agent mode? This has, let me close this. That had nothing to do with the agents at all, right? This is just straight away. This is just plain old Copilot prompting away. Can this be done in ask and edit? Absolutely. It can be done in ask, edit, or agent mode. Ask does it a little differently. It'll just put the answers in the up. If you say I'm in an ask mode, it'll just talk to you. You can brainstorm with it up here. And then when you go to edit and agent mode, then it starts to actually update files and it can look across your entire code base, so on and so forth. Yeah, it's pretty slick stuff. Now, what I want to show you is if I go over here and I say file, preferences, and I'm going to go to settings, and I'm going to type in chat, and I'm going to apologize because I didn't write down which one it is. But there's a whole bunch of settings for chat, and one of them is that you can actually enable it to look at different files outside of what you're doing, right? To get your prompts. I'm going to show you what that is. So you have to find out where to turn it on. That's an easy another AI query you can do in ChatGPT. But if I come in here into .github, right? So that's where you put all your YAML for example, for your GitHub Actions. You create a file. Initially, you can change this, but the default is you name the file copilotinstructions.md, right? I'll press enter. Now in there, I have just a simple thing. Requirements for all functions. Include comment-based help, for example, .synopsis. So that's how you do comment-based. That's one of the things you do when you build a PowerShell function. Now let's come back here. Oops, let's open up on the file again, make sure that we are in PowerShell. And I'm going to do the quick Copilot again. I can hit up arrow, it remembers my chat or my prompts, which is cool because I'm going across a bunch of files trying to do stuff. You're good to go. You need to be doing this today if you are a programmer. This is a great demo. Thank you, Dale. Appreciate it. Yeah, if you're not doing this, AI won't take your job. Someone who knows how to use AI will. That's me. Yeah, I'll show you. I'm going to show you this now. How you just knock stuff out of the park. Anyway, so I'm going to say, let's see if we can do another fib function. Press enter. Starts to figure things out, and hopefully we get what I expect. But doing AI demos live is like eating a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Okay, who sees a difference in what that output is? So I updated a file, right? So this becomes part of my context, the Copilot instructions, and it becomes this works right now just for this particular just for this workspace, but you can make it so it's for all your workspaces and so on. There's all different ways that you can do it. But because I said inside of that in Copilot-instructions MD, make sure you do comment-based help. Not only do I get the code, right, but it also wrote out the help for me. We'll accept that. So now imagine if I'm sitting here and this is correct. Calculate Fibonacci's. And I think that does a function. Yep. And let's see, it even just does it. Yep. And it describes the parameter and gives me that, knocks out a couple examples. And it's everything I hate to do, right? I always save that for last. And then I come back the next day and go, what was my Fibonacci thing doing? Oh, I don't have any examples. Great. So I just find this to be super. For a lazy sysadmin, PS enthusiast, can you share your Copilot instructions file or share? Absolutely correct. And I don't limit laziness to sysadmins. I think anybody working in the software field, if you're not lazy, you're not good. Because if you're lazy, you're going to look to automate, you're going to look to use AI, you're going to look at all the different tools to get your job done faster and better. Reduce the cognitive load. I don't have to sit here and think about help anymore. And we're only just scratching the surface here, folks. We are all lazy. That is why we automate. Thank you. Yeah, Pete. I knew Pete was there. Pete's the laziest on the group, man. He will try to automate a 30-second task that he does once and he'll spend 8 hours doing it. I'm only kidding. But yeah, so now the other thing is I can come in here and say for every function that I create, make a unit test, right? So this can start getting really interesting. Let me rename this again so it doesn't come up. Now this GitHub, you can read about Copilot instructions. Can you share your Copilot instructions MD file? Not really. I'm not going to share it. I don't. I change them all the time, and I have things in there that I don't want to have out there. But there's tons of people out there that are showing how to get this, how to seed that, put these things in. And again, this works for any language. It even works for Markdown. So if you want to say, hey, in my Markdown, I want to always do ABC type lists, or I want to be able to have this style in my Markdown or in my HTML or in my CSS. So let's not be myopic. Let's, a broad range vision of what this is. Yeah. So let me just change the name here so it doesn't. Now this also applies, whatever, doesn't matter what I name it, just so it doesn't pick it up. Okay, so, and that works with, if you start doing agent type stuff, it also uses the Copilot instructions. Cool, let's go on to some more fun stuff. Other fun stuff. What do we got? Okay, I didn't show NES, but let's try. Yeah, let's do a little NES. What time? We got 10 minutes. What do we got? This is a great idea. I'm updating my GitHub template. You're welcome, Martin. Hey, glad to see you here. And we have, can you share? No, okay, we already did that question. And I'm not trying to say I won't share it. I'm probably going to write some stuff up about how to, maybe some ideas on Copilot instructions. But there's a ton of people out there that have already started doing this kind of stuff. You can get lots better ideas from looking at the web, or even you can even ask AI to generate your Copilot stuff. In fact, in Cursor, what's really interesting is you create something called Cursor rules, which is similar to what this is. And people are now saying, don't bother writing your own Cursor rules. What you want to do is as you're doing your code, you grab your code and you say, hey, AI, what kind of Copilot instructions should I have for this? And then AI can assist you in building this. So it's it's just big brain thinking of like, oh, step outside the box. Like, oh, let me ask AI to generate my Copilot instructions, and then iterate on that, and then you use them over and over. And then as you do more projects or whatever you're doing, you can then ask it, hey, can you update the instructions based on some of the new things I'm doing? Anyway, so we got that. Now let's go to greetings.txt, right? So this is another PowerShell file, and basically what it is. And then this is going to get into some agent stuff. And so, I'm from the old school. That cracks me up. Yeah. So I come from I was just already doing that. So Pete was already doing the ask AI to update my instructions. Absolutely. Let AI do everything, because it's going to do everything. And yes, it won't replace you yet. But anyway, so I come from the thinking of red-green testing, where when we really started getting into test-driven development, if you were worth your salt, you write your test first, even if the stuff. So if you're going to write it, if I was going to write it in C#, I would write the class. I would write the test that would instantiate a class and call a method and test it, even though the class and the method didn't exist. And it's the same thing in PowerShell, right? So here I'm going to say, I want to use this greet function. Doesn't exist in what I'm doing here. And if I was to run this, if I do, let's see if it invoke pester, it should fail. Come on, baby. And then I'm using, right, there we go. So we see that the test fails. So this is what they call red-green testing. So this is red, it fails, and then I would go in and I would create my function and say, okay, let me write something that does a greet and says hello world and returns that. And then I would then run the test and it would turn green. And that's a mindset that I've been in for decades, right? So now we take it to a next level. And what I'm going to do is we're going to go into agent mode. So I'm going to click on the chat, right? And I'm going to make sure down here on the bottom right, I'm in agent mode. Going to pick a model. I'm going to use the latest GPT-4.1, right? So I have my context, which is this file. And notice that file is also here. Right, there's the greet test. So the current file becomes part of the context. So it knows about this file. It knows about my workspace, which is not important, but for this example, but it's good for you to know. So I have my context, I have the model chosen, and I'm in agent mode. Let's see if I can do this. I'm going to say gen the code from the test. So I'm being very minimal here. So I'm in these this demo may or may not work. So notice, and it looks like it may have worked. How awesome is that? Now check this out. So I use the latest model from OpenAI, which is super tuned for programming. And let me just, I'm going to keep this. I'm going to split the screen. So from the test, I just created, it read the test, knew what it wanted to do, and then generated the greet function. And it still it did the synopsis. I don't know why. Maybe I need to do a reload. And when I typed in my prompt and it pulled all that information together to pass into the model to act and then tell the agents what to do, it first came up with a plan based on your test in greet.tests. You need a PowerShell function named greet that returns hello world, blah, blah, blah. I've created it, and then it tells me what it did. Now, that's freaking amazing. Okay. Now, this is a simple example. I wanted to boil it down to the simplicity so you can see this thing in action. And now I have something set up, and I come back and I invoke Pester, and now that's really, this is going to be cool. So I'm going to say invoke, and it still didn't, because back in the test, right, I didn't include the greet.ps1. So I'm going to copy this error, right? I'm going to go in here, Control C, Control V into the prompt, and I'm going to press enter, and I'm telling the model, hey, this is the error I got. Let's see what it does with it. All right, how sweet is that? It figured out what the problem was, and it now is dot sourcing it. Now, maybe you don't like dot sourcing that way. I don't, but I'm going to leave it for now because that's another, I'm working on setting up a workshop, like a multi-hour workshop. It'll be a premium offer, but how to go through this, how to try these things out, how to interact and do context models and prompting to really make this puppy sing. So let's see if it works. And it didn't, but I'm going to leave it at that. So I can continue to try and do this. Greet is not recognized. PS script. And I'm just going to cheat here, and I don't think that's going to work, but yeah, I'm just leave it at that. So I can continue to pound on the model and say, hey, this is not right, and you got to fix it. Or I can try to fix it myself. I prefer to use the AI to continue to do this, but let's continue. So let's see if I can come down here and add another test. And I'm going to say it should use a param name. Okay. So what's really interesting, there we go. By me typing in that description for the test, right? It used that as part of the prompt in the context to generate the test that I wanted. Okay. So let's take a look at what it did. And it says, okay, so hyphen figured out greet should have a hyphen name in the test. And it does expects hello Alice, and it should be correct. Now I'm going to come back to my agent, right? So now I've created my another test, remember, red, green, even though my tests aren't working. I should set it up correctly, but never mind. And I'm going to up arrow to gen the code from the test. So what I'm hoping that's going to happen, and hopefully this is not another AI craziness, it tells me now your test expects the greet function to accept a name parameter. TDD AIDD. There you go. AI-driven development. Somebody's been doing some reading. That's exactly correct. So now it's coming back to this. Notice it made two changes, and I can toggle through the changes. And then if I choose, I can say, nah, I don't want the first one, and I can undo, or I want the second one or not the second one. I'm going to keep them all. But notice what it did. It went over the top. It actually So put in the param name, right? And it did either it does hello world as a base, as a hello world as a default, and hello name that way. Now, I wouldn't write it that way. I would prefer to default the name equal hello world. But that's something that I can then type into, I can tell AI to do it. And the reason I would do that is because this becomes part of a conversation and it becomes part of the memory for this session, what I'm trying to do. So if I created another type of thing, it would actually say, oh, this person wants to do doesn't want to do if then else's and do bound parameter checks, wants to default it on the param. Now, so the really weird thing is I can come back over here, and this is going to be the last part I'm doing this part of the demo, and I can say run tests, and I'm going to tell the agent to do that. Now, I don't know what's going to happen. Oh, how sweet it is. Um, and it's going to try and run the tests, right? All right, DS, thanks for dropping in. Get on my YouTube channel, and you can hit the notification when I publish the video. So what you can do, see here is it wants to run this command, and it's going to want to run and it's not going to do it correctly, right? Because I actually want to run invoke pester, and I'm using 4.1 preview. So 4.1 preview is new, so it's better tuned. So let me see what happens if I change. Right, I'm going to change models. I'm going to change over to 3.7 Sonnet. And okay, so that's cool. So what's really interesting here is it ran the test and it said, "Oh, you got an error." It was talking to the terminal. It figured out there was an error and it now is trying to correct it. You're welcome, Deepak. Thanks for dropping in. I'm going to go for like another 10 minutes. So if folks want to drop, it's fine. If you want to hang out, that's fine. So it tried to run the file. It got errors, and then the agent is hooked up into the terminal, and it says, oh, "Okay, I see the error. Let me see if I can fix it." And it's actually going back into the greet.test and trying to dot source the file. And then it wants to try to run it again. So I'm going to just let it run it again, see if that makes a difference. Don't know. So there we go. You can see it's running. And now it worked, right? Now I didn't want it to run straight away like that, but so now what the agent is doing is like, oh, you want to run tests? I know how to interact with the terminal. I'll take care of that for you. And if we take a look at things like the MCP servers, which we're going to finish up the demos with that in a minute. You can see here terminal selection. You can see terminal selection here and last command. Those are the MCP capabilities. So what that means is we now have crazy integration between the agents doing their agent thing, creating codes, creating tests, creating code, tests, documentation, and it can actually run the tests and it'll monitor to see what came out of the tests to say, oh, it was successful, continue on, or hey, there was a problem, let me try and fix it. Now, this is the next levels of AI and autonomous agents. Let this thing sit here and iterate, and then you're off to the races. Are there question from Jared? Are there MCP servers for network shares? I believe there are. I don't know if you were here earlier, but I'll repeat. Definitely go out and ask AI. Go to ChatGPT or your favorite one that has web search capability, or I dare say use Google search, which I haven't. Don't use whatever, and do a search on awesome MCP servers, and there's just tons and tons and tons. So that might be there, it may not be there, but there's a good chance that somebody's working on that. You're welcome. So basically, this is where I'm saying I'm starting to do this. Like, why does it need me to say continue? I don't think it does. And in fact, one of the new releases from OpenAI is called Codex CLI. They have a flag on it that says go full blown auto, go full blown, right? Don't even like, here's what I want you to do. Here's my code base. You keep going till you think you know what, if you got a right answer. And that's vibe coding. Now, at the end of the day, you can sit back and go, oh, that's not professional. You can't code that way. Well, yes, no, maybe so. And I'll show you some things in a second. So are we all just going to give give into vibe coding and not actually bother learning the nuts and bolts of anything, I certainly feel insecure not knowing the details. Well, that's up to you. I don't need to know specific details like if it's going to get down to this kind of thing. Um, Depending on what I'm building, yes, that's why you can get in and say, well, at the end of the day, if I check this in, I can do a diff on my own and figure out things, what to do. And so that's it's up to you. I think this amplifies our understanding. Vibe coding, I think people, they hear the word vibe coding, so they just like back in the days when they said, get rid of waterfall development. No planning, just start writing tests, unit tests that can prove your code works. This, that, the other thing, and people went, "Oh, that's unprofessional. You have to have an upfront planning session." Yeah, to a degree, but not as long as we used to do. And then there's extreme programming started really pushing that, and people were very uncomfortable when DevOps first hit. And one of the companies got up in one of the things back in 2007 or whatever it was, and they said, "Oh, we push to production 10 times a day." And people walked out of that and said, "That's unprofessional. How can you do that and feel and be safe?" Well, if you have all your unit tests in place and you have your safety nets and you're comfortable with what you're doing, and you know your code to a certain degree, you can push that button on a regular basis and have the ability to build canary type deployments so you can roll back quickly, so on and so forth. Or if you have a pipeline that actually pushes things that well and that quickly, you can make a change, hit the button, deploy your new stuff, and you're back up and running. And Patrick says, RuCode lets you set how autonomous you want to be. Absolutely. So RuCode does all of the tools are doing it. So thanks for bringing up RuCode. RuCode, and that's what you have to do is when you're sitting. I am not wedded to Visual Studio Code. I'm just happen to be showing that today. But all the other ones, Aider, Kleinbot, Ru, Spark, Codex CLI, I'm going to play. It's the same concept. It's context, model, prompt. Now, some of them have like a different set of hyphen. Here's a different parameter setting or a switch that does this, does that. But this is where we're heading. It's all converging. Daniel Hopkins says, I haven't vibe coded, but I can figure the people who can do it successfully know enough apps, and it's not even that's a good point, Daniel. Knowing enough about setting the handling the errors, and it's what, don't worry about the errors. And it depends on what you're doing. If I'm going to be working on a medical application, I may not do vibe coding. If I'm just trying to do a proof of concept, rather than sitting there for a bunch of time, um, you know, I might just do it just to get some ideas and go, oh, okay, great, and I'll take this piece, this piece, this piece, or I might have something that works just well enough. Ron, will this session be made available? Yes, it will be. Please get on my YouTube channel. You can search for my name, Doug Fink, on YouTube. Hit the subscribe and notification, and I will be publishing it there. Aider, Klein, they all have the similar functionality. That's right, David. So everything's converging to this. So that's why I don't have LLMs are a commodity. These techniques are a commodity. This is your opportunity to get here and figure out. Pick the tool you want. You want to do a Klein or Aider? Perfect. Understand what's going on. Don't be afraid of it. Explore and experiment. It takes time to get an intuition about what the models are doing, what these things are doing. What can you do? What can't you do? When does it go off the rails? This is not about like, oh, I'm going to just build Uber on a Sunday, and I'm just going to say, build me an Uber app. It's not going to happen. Okay, so in other words, you have to know the nuts and bolts. I don't know about the nuts and bolts. I don't, unfortunately, I'm a seasoned coder. So I don't know. Um, I've done some very complex things where I just vibe coded, and you know, I didn't know how. I was like, I don't know how to do this. Let me see what AI comes up with, and we got into a thing, and it wasn't right, and I kept going. Well, this doesn't work. Copy paste the error. This doesn't work, and then finally it figured out how to solve it, and then I was able to sit back and look at it and go, wow, that's interesting, and I was amazed that it could do it. But that's neither here nor there. Would I put it into production? No, I would take it a bunch of steps further, but I could sit back and go, wow, this is pretty cool. And that gave me a better sense of when would I use it in a production setting, right? Like, oh, I would use it this way, not this way. You really just got to get in and try, you got to try it out. I don't know if that answers the question or that's very airy fairy. Pete says, I only made a little web client today, all from VS Code using agent mode. Absolutely. Let's take a look at a couple of more things. Yeah, I'm going to say this. I hope it doesn't offend people. If you're reading books about and you're reading blog posts about how to have sex, you're not going to know what's going on until you actually do it. And it's the same thing with this. You can read about it and, well, vibe coding. Should I use vibe coding? Should I use this LLM? Should I use this developer tools? Those. You got to get in and you got to, hey, thanks, Daniel. And you got to check out what's going on. Does Copilot help rewrite your prompts? Absolutely. You can ask it to help rewrite your prompts, and there are times when you do write a prompt that it comes back and says, "Hey, I'm gonna make this prompt like this," and that's what's cool about this whole pane here. It tells you what it's figured out from like, "Hey, this is what my understanding is. Do you want me to go ahead?" Or it just goes ahead and does it, and then it tells you what it does. Yeah, you just got to do it. You can't sit back and like, this is not about using a sniper rifle. We're in here throwing grenades. And if that's something that you're not comfortable with, well, there's going to be a lot of people comfortable doing it. Sure, if you're a seasoned coder, it's going to be better because you can go, oh, I see what happened. Forget using AI, and I'm going to go in and tweak A, B, C, and D, and I'm golden. But if you have enough tests and you have enough unit tests and you have enough user acceptance tests, right, that are testing performance and all that kind of stuff that AI has helped you build, you have a pretty good safety net of what's going on. So I want to show you this. Let's do a done. Have it write your git commit message. Absolutely. Have it write your git commit. So if I go over here and here's my git session right on the left-hand side, I can hit, I'll pick one like, I'm not going to commit it, but there's my git. I just said stage the greet.ps1 and I can have it's part of Studio, add a greet function to return friendly greetings based on a user input. Awesome. Also, as a note, where you have Copilot instructions, that's for code genning. There's another one, Copilot commit instructions. So if you have a specific way that you'd like your commits done, or you need to follow some protocols for your company, or the way you like to have commit, you can then actually have here Copilot-git instructions.md. Figure out the file, and then in there you can be specific about what you're doing. And when you go in and hit your button, it'll come up with a commit message and then do the rest of the stuff. Cool. So let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of this. Do a done on that. I'm going to stay with Sonnet. I'm going to stay in the agent mode. Now check this out. I love this demo. Okay, we got a whole bunch of people hanging out on a Friday, hanging out on Good Friday. So I'm going to start. Now, there's a whole other thing. Somebody else said earlier about AIDD, AI-driven development, right? Test-driven development, AID, AI-driven development. I am a big fan of AI-driven development. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to create, doesn't matter what the name of the file is. I just happen to call it spec. So I know what I'm talking about, or think I know what I'm talking about. And I say, I'm just going to type in PowerShell to-do list script. And I'm going to say implements CRUD. How many people here know what CRUD is in a software context? Any takers? Or everybody's getting more coffee? Yep, excellent. So CRUD, right? Now watch this. This is again, context. This is excellent. Context, right? I got my file open. It's a markdown file. So it knows the type of file. There you go. Create, read, update, delete. You got it. So I've got my context, right? And it's now part of, over here on the right-hand side, part of my Copilot says, okay, I'm going to use that as context. My model, right, is I'm just going to keep Sonnet. Again, you can pick whichever one you like. The beauty is if something like Sonnet, whatever I'm just going to do now, if it doesn't do what I want, I can say undo, and then I can choose another model, up arrow for my prompt, and then run it again with a different model. It's beautiful. So I don't know if we're going to get to MCPs. That's unfortunate. Okay. So it has that. And now I'm going to say, so I've got my context, I've got my model, I'm in agent mode, and I'm going to say flesh out the spec. Now, you use any language you want, right? You don't have to even type in English. If you don't like the word flesh out the spec because it's not, Sonnet 3.7 is really good at this. 4.1's, yeah, they're all good. Sonnet, Gemini 2, the whole 9 yards. Again, I don't care. LLMs doesn't matter to me. So flesh out the spec. If you want to get more engineer-like and say, please give me more details, blah, blah, blah on this thing, whatever. I'm going to press enter. You can use the prompt any way you want. The more context, the more specifics you can give it, the better it is. So now I figured out I'll help you flesh out the specification. Right now, this becomes part of the conversation. So back to does Copilot actually enhance your prompt? This is in essence enhancing the prompt, right? So it does a planning step, it does a reflection step, and then it should execute. Okay, so it read the spec. I see the current spec is very minimal, so now it's making fun of me. It's mocking me. That is correct. Let me flesh out this spec with more details about features, functionality, and implementation requirements. So now AI. All right, so there you go. All right. Now again, and this is in a markdown file. So it just wrote a bunch of stuff for me, didn't generate code. I can go through this and do what I can keep it or undo it. So let's keep that. And you can see now it tells me what it added. Awesome. And we'll take a look at this after. So RCN asked the question, if you have a large code base, should you specify each file as context or just a global code base in your prompt? You have to experiment with that. It depends on the size of it says it depends on your size of your code base, and it depends on the complexity of the code base. And remember, so when I talk about the three principles, right? Context, I say you can't do too much, you can't do too little, you need Goldilocks, just right. There's no way to know that, right? So you may go, I've been working on a couple of things, and it's not like it's hundreds of lines of code, but it's a complex programming thing I'm doing, and sometimes it just doesn't get it right. And I don't sit there and go, well, get rid of AI. I go, okay, do I have to adjust my context? Do I need to do this? Can this thing even do it? Do I need to choose a different model? Or do I need to improve my prompt? So it all depends. Unfortunately, the answer is it all depends. There is no one size fits all. But the more you work with it, the better it's going to be. You're going to understand and get that intuition. And the other point is I'm not going to publish the PPT at this point. But if you do come to my premium live streams, I give that out as well. So the good news is this is the worst model you're going to ever use. So wrap your head around that. This is the worst it's going to be. So, somebody brought up code base. So here's a pound sign. I can say code base, right? And GitHub Copilot starts to figure out okay, thank you, Doug, for the information. You're welcome. So, and you get the video if you get on the YouTube channel and you hit the subscribe and notification, you'll know when I publish it and you'll be able to see those PowerPoint slides again. So, right, so this is the code base piece. This will improve over time as well, right? So all these are like the initial days, so to speak. Cursor AI, Windsurf, all of them are like, hey, what are we doing here? How do we do this? How do we improve? This is the worst it's going to be. So the sooner you get involved and trying it out. So let's go back to the spec, right? Took it from 1 line to 80 lines, and it talks about data storage, to-dos.json, talks about the create, the read, the update, the delete, talks about a user interface, awesome. Code structure, documentation, testing. I have done this for different things, and at the end I go, oh, I would never have thought to put that into a spec. And then it even shows some PowerShell how it would use it. Now, if I wanted to, I can come in here and I can say, I don't want it to be in JSON. I want it to be in CSV, right? But let's keep it as JSON. Oops. That's a bummer. Let's redo that. So I'll hit the up arrow, flesh out the spec. So I'm going to take it one more step, and then we're going to show one example of an MCP. I'm already 2 minutes over my 15 minutes over. Come on, Sonnet. I noticed there might be an issue with the previous update. Let me check the current content. So it already knows from the conversation that it generated it the first time. It's like, hey, what happened? And yeah, I didn't, I deleted it. So the original file content still shows the basic line. So it's amazing. It's doing this reasoning about our entire session. And I just got to, say it again. This is the worst it's going to be, right? We've got the new versions of OpenAI. models. We got Gemini, Flash coming, and Sonnet's going to, and Anthropic, I'm sure they're going to follow relatively soon. So now we're going to apply the edits. Come on, you can do it. And I'm going to keep that, let it finish telling me stuff. And what I'm going to do is say, implement the app. And I'm just going to kick that off. So now I have a full-fledged spec. I can pass this around. People can comment on it. They can make changes. If I like the changes that people do, if we're doing it in GitHub, I can say, this is good. Let me take that. Let me don't take this. And then I can pull that back down and then have the agent implement the spec, right? Now this is going to take a little bit longer, so I may not let it finish. And notice it's doing a search for files that match star to do star.ps1. So I might have had a bunch of to-dos in here already, right? I might have started doing this manually. And it's going to say, oh, well, let me see what you got. And then it would come back and say, hey, I'm going to change these things. Is that okay? Or let me make a backup of all the good stuff. I've also been doing this with Ansible. Awesome, Pete. Absolutely. This is, again, this is not limited to programming. Ansible, infrastructure as code. People are doing, they're redoing their entire Terraform pieces, things that would take them days just to figure out. And they're just saying, they're going up to these agents and going, hey, how would I do X, Y, and Z? Yeah. So if you walk away from this, the two things you got to walk away with are you got to jump in and context models and prompts. If you understand, if you keep that in the forefront of your mind, context models and prompts, it won't make a difference what tool you use. You don't have to be wedded to Microsoft. You don't have to be wedded to Windsurf. You don't have to be wedded to AI Studio from Google. It all works on those principles, right? Context models and prompts. And if this would take a little bit of time, just a question for the rest of the people. What are you using to train your local models? Okay, if somebody wants to jump on that, I don't train or fine tune. I take the 80-20 rule personally, and I see how far my prompts get me. And if they don't do enough, then I'll consider. But I don't do it. Sometimes you need to set some rules because they get way too eager to make things complex. Right. That's again back to context and prompting. At like 3.7, what did I do the other day? I was writing an agent in PowerShell. And in the agent code, I had a bunch of instructions which are part of the prompt, and I had a prompt. And I said to the agent, improve the agent thing that I'm doing. And not only did it improve the code, but then it went ahead and improved my prompt. I'm like, don't do that. But it was great. It was great to improve. And I was like, wow, this thing doesn't need me. Cool. So here's the to do. We'll keep that. And it just basically, let's just fold all that stuff down. And unfortunately, it did it that way. Oops. Let's unfold. And it gave me a bunch of functions to get to do data, save it, add it. Right. So I just wrote a little to-do application. And what's really interesting is if I run this, the way it talks me through how to use it is just way and above what I would do. But anyway, I am planning to create an agent that can read our organization wiki. Absolutely, absolutely. You got it. That's exactly what you want to do. I'm going to go, sorry, I'm going to go, if you want to hang out, I'm going to do an MCP example. But what Suryendu just said, that's exactly what you want to do. Read your wiki, pull it in. MCPs are perfect for driving documentation into the environment. Pete's not in a rush. Excellent. So that is, and that's a great thing. Pick something you know about, right? And then try to work it up as an agent or an MCP. That way you know what to expect with what's going on. So let's talk about MCPs. It's an ecosystem, and everybody's on board. And even the guys that developed it and created it internally at Anthropic were quite amazed at the reception internally. And then when they put it out, they were absolutely amazed at how people said, oh, this is great stuff. In addition, at the latest, what was the last thing that Microsoft did? Microsoft just had some kind of conference. I don't remember what it was. And Satya Nadella came up and said MCPs are amazing, and that's why things like Visual Studio Code can host MCPs. And the guys at Anthropic, like they were bowled over. They're like young guys too. They're like all in their mid-20s, and they were bowled over that Microsoft was excited. So what do we got? Let's take a look. So I'm gonna if you inside your VS code, right? Let me rename this to MCP.json. You create an MCP JSON, and that does a bunch of things for you. Okay. Notice I have a start button. Notice I have an add server. If I click add server, this is how you can add MCPs that you find on the internet, right? Be careful what you do because you don't know what's in those puppies. This is not sandboxed. But so you can run a command, right? You can run HTTP server, which I'm going to do here. You can do something where it installs an npm package, a node package, or a pip package, which is a Python, or it can actually pull down a Docker image that has everything set up correctly so that the MCPs know how to work it. So in this case, what I'm going to do is let's go to Google, and I'm going to look up Zapier MCP server, and they have a free tier. And let's see if I can, am I logged in? Let's go get started. So this is their stuff for doing stuff. I was just looking at a sandbox Python runner. Awesome. I want to hear about your Python runner when you get there. So I came in here, free account, and it basically creates a URL for you. You go into edit MCP actions, and you can add any of the Zapier actions that you want. Oops, well, right. So, and then you can come in here and you can search. This doesn't look, yeah. So you can search for all the different kinds of actions that it has. So you can, right, because Zapier types into everything like Google Calendar, Google Docs. You have to give it your ID. So it does all those standard things that you would do for no code, low code, right? So here I'm just saying I want to do the weather by Zapier to get the current weather, right? That's one of their service, their plugins, and they've wrapped it so it works with MCP. So if I go back to Studio, this is my URL, which I'm going to cycle through after this, but right. And the way I created it was I said add server, and I said HTTP, and I dropped this URL in here, and it created this little JSON configuration. It's that simple. If you're using Claude Desktop, it's going to be the same thing. And then what they do is they put the word MCP in front of it. I don't know why they both don't agree with it, do it the same way, but that's it. Typically, this is how you do stuff. This is how you set up the configurations for MCPs that you want to use. Now, what does that mean? I'm going to start the MCP server, right? And it started. Let's go up here to MCP list servers. There's the Zapier server running, and I can show the output. Now, if it didn't work, it would show up the errors right here. But it goes out, it discovers the tools, and let's see if this works because it did a status, so it may not work. Oh, so yeah, today it was a little wacky, but let's see if it works now. So I already see there might be a problem with it, right, with the 405 status. But if you're building your own or you're using somebody else's, when it does a start, it has an initialization handshake process. And if it has any kind of issues, you'll see a message here, and then you can begin to figure out, oh, what's going on? Maybe it needs a, authorization token that I need to give it, or blah, 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 blah. But this is how you start to work with it and understand it. Again, you got to jump in, hit the run button, see what happens. Now, let's see if I can come over here to my prompt. I have right. So again, my context is what I'm going to, is the stuff that I'm doing. And basically it's empty at this point. And I'm going to just say, what is the weather EATHR in New York City? Now, before I hit enter, you can also click on this little toolbox, and then you can see, here's my running Zapier service. It has an add and edit action. That's what they provide for you. So you can do some other stuff in here. And there's the weather by Zapier Get Current. Okay. These other ones come out of the box, and then you can go check these out. You can search GitHub. This is all from Microsoft and GitHub Next. All different things you can do with an MCP server. Now, me typing in what is the weather, pressing enter, the entire agent AI framework that this has says, oh, let's see what I can do. And it starts checking its tools and it checks its MCP server and it says, oh, guess what? You have a thing called get the weather. Thanks for the pedantic. Gotcha. Yep. Awesome. That's it. That is a pretty good stuff, Pete. So so the AI agent figures out from the list of tools in the MCP of what it might want to run. Remember, when you set this all up and you have all these tools, this becomes part of your context, right? So here's our context, whatever model you want to use, and then I prompted it. So when I prompted about the weather, since all the weather tool was in its overall context that GitHub Copilot provided, it says, hey, do you want to run the weather service? Now, this works the same way in all the other ones. They may have a different button you click or a different place where you put your prompt or a different way to select models. But ultimately, it's context model prompt. Okay. And then what it does, I can click on this and say, oh, what does it want? So it happened to be that it needed latitude and longitude, is how the Zapier stuff works. And the model figured out the latitude for NYC and then said, oh, okay, I want to plug that in. This is similar to what I was talking about with the new agent capabilities with the Invoke web search I showed at the beginning. It figures out what it wants to do, figures out, oh, I know the signature of that function call. Let me plug in the parameters. Now let's see if it works, even though I got a 405, which I know hopefully didn't matter. So now it's going to try and run that over on Zapier, right, with that latitude and longitude. You as a user don't even know what just happened. Now there you go. And 67 degrees, and that is correct. So, and it just used the Zapier, got the weather, brought it back. Now, when it prompted me and said, do you want to continue? There's all kinds of switches you can put in here and say, don't ever prompt me. And you wouldn't know whether this was going out to a URL or something you have locally, so on and so forth. Doesn't matter which model that you had or which provider. I could have been running this with Grok, DeepSeek, or Gemini. That's the wacky thing about this. The additional piece is I can then take this and drop it into Claude desktop, and it would continue to work. Hackathon ideas. I'm in. As Dale saying hackathon. Absolutely. And I'm not even showing you how to build one yet. And we definitely don't have time for that. So what the real cool part is, this is the light bulb that when I know that okay, so any application, so I could take this over to Cursor AI, I could take this to Windsurf, and it will work out of the box. And because it's using it, and in this case, if I was running everything locally, if I wanted to run if I wanted to add a server and the command, let me type in py, because that's how I would run my Python, right? And let's press enter. Okay. So this is how you start to flesh out a Python call, standard CLI stuff. You put your args in here. So if I was running this locally and I had Windsurf put in that I was using, it would be the same kind of a setup. Maybe the tag's different. And then these pieces would run in Cursor. It would run in Windsurf. It would run in Claude Desktop. It'll run in Data Fabric. It'll run in Azure. When I started going, I was like, oh, because I was building on MCP and I was like, oh, I want to bring this over to here and here. I'm like, oh, wow, that's going to be really easy because that's what the model context protocol is all about. It discovers the tools. It knows which ones to use. It knows if it's going to launch it into a URL or in Python or in TypeScript or in Node, right? So all these exist. So that pretty much covers everything. And again, it's the worst it's ever going to be. It's just going to get better and better and better. And then when I type my prompt in here, right? Because now Visual Studio Code is a MCP host. So it knows how to discover this stuff. It knows how to make it part of the prompt. And it just provides it when you start prompting or asking your questions. It provides all that information, calls the appropriate model that you have selected. And then the model goes, oh, I know what you should do. We're going to call this thing over here with these parameters, and you're off to the races. Now, unfortunately, I was going to show you how to build an MCP server in Python, which is an absolutely cool thing. And it's amazing when it comes alive. But I'm going to save that for another live stream. So I just want to thank everybody for hanging out. I know it's a Friday, and Again, here you go. Definitely hit that YouTube link. Check out my meetup page. I'm going to be doing more of these. You're welcome, everybody. And if you check out that link and you do the subscribe and notify, you'll know when I publish this video. So if you want to review it or jump around and see what we were talking about, and just jump in and stay curious. We'll talk to you later. Take care. You're welcome. Excellent. Glad you enjoyed the session. I had fun. Okay, over and out.